You ever have one of those nights where the world just flips upside down, and you're left standing there, wondering how it all went so wrong? It was 2:17 a.m. when the fire alarm screamed through our old family cabin in Pine Hollow, Montana, like it was trying to wake the dead. I stumbled out of bed, heart pounding, the smell of smoke already clawing at my throat sharp, chemical, wrong. I'm Jake Larson, just a guy who codes apps for a living, happier fixing bugs than dealing with people. That cabin. My granddad poured his soul into it back in '52, built it plank by plank after the war, a place where my dad learned to fish, where I taught my daughter Ellie to make s'mores. It was our safe spot, you know? So when I grabbed Ellie, 15 and half asleep, and dragged her out into the snow, I wasn't ready to see that east wall glowing like a damn bonfire. We stood there, barefoot, freezing, watching flames eat up everything: Granddad's old toolbox, Mom's recipe cards, Ellie's childhood drawings tacked to the fridge. I called 911, voice shaking, barely getting the words out. And then I saw her, Carol Vance, HOA president, queen of checklists, standing on the snowy path with her phone on a tripod, live streaming our nightmare like it was some reality TV special. She wasn't calling for help, wasn't moving an inch. When the fire truck's lights lit up the hill, she turned to her camera and said, cool as ice, "This property's in violation. Emergency services can't proceed until fines are paid." Like she could just stand there and let my family's history burn. Let me take you back a couple weeks. Ellie and I drove up to Pine Hollow to winterize the place, chop some firewood, check the pipes, maybe make some pancakes on that old cast iron skillet. The cabin's on a small lot, nothing fancy, but it's been ours forever, weathered every storm since Eisenhower was in office. We always paid our HOA dues, nodded at neighbors, kept to ourselves. Then Carol showed up on our porch, clipboard in one hand, a cheap tape measure from some online store in the other, still with the barcode stuck on it. "Mr. Larson," she said, like she was addressing a press conference, "I'm here for a mandatory compliance check." Ellie, sharp as ever, whispered, "What's next?" "Measuring the clouds." I had to bite my tongue not to laugh. Carol measured the cabin's roofline 3 times, got 3 different numbers, but decided it was 2 inches too tall. Then she turned to her phone, streaming to her little HOA fanbase, and declared, "Violation confirmed. Notice to follow." It was like I'd stepped into her personal drama production, and I was the villain of the week. I asked her how a cabin older than her HOA could break rules that didn't exist when it was built. She spouted some nonsense about community standards and property values, like she was reading from a script. I stayed calm. Dad, a retired lawyer, taught me how to spot a bully hiding behind paperwork. 2 days later, a notice showed up, $500 fine for structural noncompliance, typed in some god-awful font that looked like it was trying too hard. I called the number on it, asked for a remeasurement. Carol's response: "Board measurements are final unless you hire a licensed surveyor at your cost." I asked for the HOA bylaws. She said I couldn't see them because I was in violation. Cute, right? A perfect little trap. So I started keeping track dates, times, screenshots of her live streams, even that dumb tape measure. Something told me this wasn't just about a roof. A week later, Carol held a community meeting at the rec hall. It was just her husband Greg, and their son Tyler, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. She fired up a PowerPoint titled "Safeguarding Pine Hollow," and there was our cabin on slide 4, with a big red arrow pointing to the roof, labeled "View Obstruction." Slide 6 claimed our foundation was a flood risk. In Montana, floods. I was about to lose it when Mrs. Clara Tate, 78 years old and sharp as a tack, walked in. Clara's been in Pine Hollow since the Beatles were a thing. She stood up and said, "Carol, I was on the original HOA board in '85. We never had height restrictions." Carol's face twitched, but she snapped back, "Current rules override old ones." Clara wasn't having it. "What rules? You haven't held an election in 3 years." That's when it hit me: Carol wasn't just power hungry. She was running a one-woman show with no legal backing. I teamed up with Clara, quietly digging into county records, pulling HOA filings, saving Carol's live streams. Ellie wanted to blast it all online, but I told her, "Kid, sometimes you let the other side dig their own grave while you hand them the shovel." But I didn't know how far Carol was willing to go. That night, the fire hit too fast, too clean, like someone wanted it to burn. No faulty wiring, No stray spark, just the stench of accelerant. The fire chief, Mike Torres, got there in 10 minutes, but Carol stood in his way, waving her phone, still streaming, saying, "Unpaid safety fees block access." Mike had to ram her car off the path with his truck, but by then, the cabin was gone, nothing left but ash and the stone chimney. Carol walked up to me after, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "Maybe now you'll respect the rules." Something snapped, not anger, but this cold, clear focus. She wasn't getting away with this. I hired a lawyer, Rachel Cole, who listened to my recording of Carol's voice that night and said, "That's obstruction of emergency services. That's big." The FBI got involved. Turns out, Pine Hollow wasn't the only place with accidental fires followed by cheap land deals and fat checks to Carol's consulting business, over $300,000 worth. We called a real town hall, no PowerPoint nonsense. I played the audio of Carol blocking the fire truck. People gasped. Tyler, her own son, stood up and said, "I was there. I saw her do it." Carol tried to scream, "Deep fake," but the room wasn't buying it. Her little empire crumbled right there. Then came court. Carol had the nerve to sue me for defamation, thinking she could game the system again. She strutted into that courtroom like she owned it until she saw the judge's nameplate, Honorable Thomas Larson. My dad. Her face went white. She tried to cry conflict of interest, but Dad shut her down cold. Family doesn't trump evidence. The FBI laid it all out: bank records, fire patterns, her live streams, Tyler's testimony, my audio. Carol's voice filled the room. "I've been waiting for this moment." Dad leaned forward and said, "Ms. Vance, you mistook a clipboard for a crown. This court doesn't. 12 years in federal prison, $2 million in restitution, 10 years supervised release." She posted one last video before sentencing, an unhinged rant about conspiracies and voice cloning tech. It backfired. Half a confession slipped out, and it went viral for all the wrong reasons. Ellie and I rebuilt the cabin last spring, same layout, better wiring, stronger wood. We hung Carol's tape measure above the fireplace, labeled Exhibit B. Now we host potlucks every month for folks who've dealt with HOA nonsense. Call it the Tape Measure Club. It's funny, Carol thought she could burn down our past and walk away. But people like that, they only win until someone shines a light. So, tell me, ever dealt with a Carol Vance in your life? Someone who thought rules made them untouchable? Drop it in the comments. Let's hear how you fought back or wish you did. Because sometimes, justice takes a courtroom, a tape measure, and a whole lot of stubborn.